Good evening, dear listener. Find a comfortable spot, perhaps adjust your blanket, take a slow, deep breath, and pour yourself a calming cup of tea. Rest your head gently on the pillow, as if settling into a quiet harbor after a long day. Let the world outside fade away, leaving only the gentle rhythm of your breathing and the soft whisper of the night. Tonight, I invite you to step into a world where the shadows hold secrets and the air is thick with stories no modern city could ever contain. Imagine a place where every step is weighed down by the echoes of history, where the simplest task might have felt like a daunting quest, like waiting in endless lines for a bank that no longer exists, or trying to untangle a pair of headphones after a week in your pocket. A world where even the most routine moment carried the weight of survival. Picture a landscape shrouded in a faint fog, shadows dancing just beyond your sight, whispering tales of old struggles. As you breathe in, let that misty atmosphere seep into your mind, wrapping you in a quiet anticipation. This is a story about endurance, an ancient story, yet somehow it feels close enough to touch, as if the past's whispers are just a breath away. And as your eyes grow heavy, you'll soon wake not in your bed, but in a place where the air is thick with smoke, herbs, and fear, and where your role will be far stranger than anything you've known. You open your eyes slowly, but the moment is far from gentle. Instead of the familiar softness of your mattress, you find yourself lying on something rough and uneven, probably a cold, hard floor made of uneven stone or splintered wood. The surface beneath you presses uncomfortably against your back and shoulders, rough fabric or stiff leather sticking to your skin, which feels damp and sticky with sweat, or perhaps something more unmentionable. The air hits you first as a mixture of pungent odors, faintly smoky, tinged with the sharp tang of herbs burned too long, the sour stench of unwashed bodies, and the faint, lingering aroma of spilled wine or rotting meat. It's a smell that immediately makes you want to scrunch your nose, but you're too caught up in the strange, gritty reality. Your senses are assaulted from every direction: sound, sight, smell, touch, even taste, if you dare. The dim light filters through a small, barred window or a crack in the wall, casting long, flickering shadows that dance across uneven walls built from roughly hewn stones or mud bricks. The faint glow reveals scattered objects: a battered wooden table, a few rusty tools, a tattered cloak tossed over a chair, and perhaps a strange contraption, something like a mask with a long, curved beak, resting on a shelf, its hollow eyes staring back at you. The faint creak of the floorboards under shifting weight, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and the muffled cries or moans of the sick fill the air. Somewhere outside, you might hear the bell of a town crier, a herd of animals passing by, or the hurried steps of guards and merchants rushing past. Your nose detects a swirl of odors, smoke from a nearby hearth, the acrid sting of burning herbs, the acrid smell of sweat and dirt, and the faint, sour undertone of spoiled food and spilled vinegar. You can feel the coarse fibers of your clothing against your skin, rough, itchy, and stiff, like a second skin that has seen better days. The chill of the room seeps through your clothes, biting at your skin and making you shiver despite the dampness. Your tongue tastes the remnants of stale bread, a sip of water that's muddy and tepid, or perhaps a bitter drop of wine left from last night's feast, if you're lucky enough to have had one. And yet, as this unfamiliar environment slowly registers, a strange sense of humor flickers within you. Your idea of a bad morning used to be forgetting your phone charger or waking up a little later than planned. Here, it's realizing that your mask smells worse than the sick patients you're supposed to help. or that the cold breeze slipping through the cracks is nothing compared to the biting wind of uncertainty that blows through your entire day. You chuckle softly to yourself, amused by how different things can be, yet somehow still the same in their chaos. Now, with a tentative motion, you sit up carefully, feeling the rough texture of your rough tunic or cloak. Your hand reaches out to grasp what's nearby, maybe a simple wooden cup, a worn-out cloth, or the mask with the beak. It's time to get moving. You stand, wincing at the ache in your legs and the stiffness that reminds you this isn't your usual morning stretch. Your feet find the ground, cold and uneven beneath your soles, and you take a breath, steadying yourself. As you step into the world outside your makeshift shelter, perhaps a humble hut, a crowded alley, or a shared space in a bustling village, everything shifts. You are surrounded by the daily life of this place. People bustle past, some hurried, some sluggish, clad in rough wool, leather, or patchwork fabrics. Children run and shout, weaving through the crowd with unrestrained energy, while elders sit on benches exchanging stories and fanning themselves against the heat or the discomfort of their days. Dozens of faces turn towards you, some with curiosity, others with wary respect or silent apprehension. The reverberating clang of blacksmiths at work, the distant cry of merchants hawking their wares, and the distant toll of church bells or town crier's bell fill your ears in a chaotic symphony. You notice the locals' reactions to you, an outsider, perhaps clad in unfamiliar heavy garments or marked by the strange mask you carry. Some give you cautious glances, eyes narrowing with a mixture of respect and suspicion. Others seem indifferent, absorbed in their routines, their lives woven tightly into the fabric of this place. The air hums with a mixture of daily concerns, hunger, the threat of illness, the weight of tradition. And yet, beneath it all, there's a strange camaraderie, a shared resilience that makes you feel both small and strangely connected. The textures of this world cling to you, grainy dust in the streets, rough stone under your feet, the cool, damp touch of the shadows that hide behind every corner, whispering stories of hardship and perseverance. The taste of the environment might linger on your tongue, bitterness from the water, the salt of sweat, or the faint, lingering flavor of herbs used to mask the stench of decay. As you stand there, feeling the weight of this unfamiliar reality settling into your bones, it becomes clear. This is no ordinary place. To understand it fully, to grasp the true story of those who walk these streets, you'll need to step back, to see the bigger picture, beyond the dirt, the noise and the chaos. Because what you're witnessing is only a fragment of a much larger, more complex world, a world shaped by forces and struggles far older than your own, and as you look around, it's as if a veil lifts just enough to hint at the vast, intricate history that lies beneath. But for now, you just breathe in the atmosphere, thick, gritty, real, and prepare to learn what comes next. You find yourself living in a time where the world is painted in shades of grey, where the horizon stretches over sprawling kingdoms and tiny villages alike, an era that, if you look carefully, whispers stories of grandeur and hardship in every shadow. Your awakening happened somewhere around the late Middle Ages, perhaps the 14th or 15th century, a period marked by the tumultuous dance of power, faith, and survival. Think of it as a grand tapestry woven with threads of kings and peasants, clergy and merchants, warriors and wandering souls, each playing their part in a story that feels both ancient and painfully familiar. Imagine the landscape as a patchwork quilt of stone cities, fortified with walls taller than your hopes, bustling marketplaces noisier than your busiest shopping mall, but with way more pigs than people. Streets are narrow and winding, often muddy, lined with shops selling everything from bright textiles to strange herbs that smell like a mix of old socks and exotic spices. Churches, towering and imposing, dominate the skyline, their bells ringing out so often that you might think they're trying to wake the dead, or at least remind the living that they're under the watchful eye of heaven. The fields outside the city walls are a sea of crops where farmers work from dawn to dusk, often knee-deep in mud, their hands rougher than the stones beneath your feet. And somewhere in the distance you might see a castle perched atop a hill, its battlements scarred by recent sieges or the passing of armies, an ancient fortress that looks more like a giant stone turtle than a home. The social structure is as layered as a medieval cake, but with less sweetness and more uncertainty. Nobles sit high above in their grand halls, surrounded by courtiers and a retinue of servants, their lives a delicate balance of wealth and danger. Below them, the clergy hold significant sway, bishops, monks and priests, who seem to have more influence than the king himself in many matters of daily life. Then come the merchants, bustling with energy and ambition, trading silks from the Orient, or spices that make your nose tingle, while artisans craft their goods with skill passed down through generations. And at the bottom of the pyramid are the peasants, hard-working souls who wake with the first crow of the rooster, their days filled with toil and the hope of a better harvest, yet often burdened by taxes, war, and the unpredictable whims of nature. Now contrast all this with your modern life, your sleek cities, your endless streams of notifications, your comfortable homes. Your frustrations with slow Wi-Fi or traffic jams seem almost trivial when you imagine trying to herd cattle across muddy fields or carry water from a well that's a mile away, balancing a heavy pitcher on your head. Here, taking a bath was suspicious, almost like announcing to your neighbors you were planning something shady, so most washed infrequently, sometimes just rinsing off with a rag or dipping into a basin of cold water. Forget gyms, carrying buckets of water every day was the medieval equivalent of CrossFit. And your idea of a stressful morning? Well, it doesn't compare to waking up to the sound of a screaming hag in the village square or trying to dodge a plague-ridden rat that's just scurried past your doorstep. You live in a world governed by kings and queens, often more concerned with their next campaign or a coronation than your daily worries. The political landscape is a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, and city-states, each with their own rules, armies, and ambitions. Wars flare up like sudden storms, some over land, others over religious disputes, or even petty insults that escalate into full-blown invasions. In this era, a border dispute could mean a decade of destruction, or worse, a sacking that leaves towns in ruins and families torn apart. Invasions are as common as rain, and the idea of peace is often just a temporary pause between conflicts. Meanwhile, disease spreads faster than gossip in a village square. The Black Death, that infamous plague, is sweeping through regions like a dark cloud, leaving death and despair in its wake. Doctors are few and far between, armed with strange remedies, sometimes just a handful of onions carried in a pocket, believed to ward off the pestilence, or sniffing flowers soaked in vinegar, which was about as effective as wishing hard enough. Superstitions shape the collective mind more than any law or decree. People believe that a spider on the window means good luck or bad luck, depending on who you ask. Some swear that carrying a piece of amber could keep evil spirits at bay, while others think that whistling at night might summon witches or demons. Masks with long beaks, like the one you might see hanging on a wall, weren't just costumes, they were believed to trap the miasma, or bad air, that caused illness. Medical science was still an uncharted territory, and many believed that the world was governed by unseen spirits, divine will, and a dash of luck. If you wanted to survive, you'd better carry a charm, say a prayer, or just hope the next plague skips your door. All of this unfolds in a landscape that is both familiar and strange, a place where the pace of life is measured by the tolling of church bells, where every day begins with the crowing of a rooster and ends with the flickering light of a candle. You could say the rhythm is slower, more deliberate, but no less intense. A day's work is a constant dance with uncertainty, whether it's ploughing fields, repairing armor, or preparing for the next raid. When night falls, the towns quiet down, but the worries do not. Rumors swirl like smoke from the hearth, of invasions, of famine, of a sickness lurking just beyond the horizon. It's a world where survival sometimes depends more on luck and faith than skill. And so as you settle into this world, a world of stone and shadow, of faith and fear, remember that your experience here is shaped by forces far beyond your control. Kings, priests, armies, and epidemics all play their parts, weaving a story that spans generations. It's a story of endurance, of resilience, and of a society that, despite its hardships, somehow keeps going day after day, year after year. To truly grasp what it means to live here, you'd need to understand not just the grand scenes of power and plagues, but also the tiny moments, how people laughed, loved, fought, and hoped amidst the chaos. Because beneath the surface of castles and battles, beneath the layers of superstition and strife, there beats the heart of a civilization that refused to die, no matter how hard life got. And now, as you begin to see the bigger picture, you realize that every stone, every shadow, every whispered prayer is part of a story much older and more complex than you might have ever imagined. You wake up with the first light filtering weakly through a small, grimy window, or perhaps just a crack in the rough plaster wall. The air inside your humble dwelling is thick with the scent of smoke from the nearby hearth, mingled with the faint aroma of damp earth and dried herbs. Your body feels stiff, muscles protesting from a night spent lying on a simple mattress of straw or a pile of rough blankets. You stretch slowly, your limbs protesting with a dull ache, and then reach for that familiar basin, perhaps a wooden or clay vessel filled with cold water, stored just within arm's reach. The water is often tepid at best, sometimes teetering on the edge of icy, but you dip your hands into it anyway, relishing the chill that awakens your senses just enough to shake off the sluggish fog. You splash some of the water onto your face, the sensation sharp and bracing, like a splash of cold reality in a world that's mostly grey and gritty. You might even drag a rough cloth across your skin, trying to wipe away the sleep and the day's dirt, feeling the coarse fibers grate against your face and neck, leaving behind a faint scratch or two. If you're fortunate, you'll have a scrap of soap or a handful of herbs, perhaps rosemary or sage, to help mask the smell of sweat and smoke. But more often than not, it's a simple splash and a prayer that the scent doesn't offend your neighbors or invite the suspicion of illness. Forget your 10-step skincare routine. Here, survival is splashing some water and hoping the smell doesn't scare the neighbors. As you look around your modest space, the walls are dark and uneven, made from rough timber or mud bricks, smudged with soot and smoke from the fire that crackles softly nearby. The furniture is sparse, perhaps a wooden bench, a small table, and a few clay pots or iron utensils. The smell of burnt wood still lingers in the air, mixing with the faint aroma of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling beams. The floor beneath your feet is cold and uneven, creaking softly under your weight, a patchwork of worn stones or splintered boards that seem to shift with every step. The low hum of the house is punctuated by the occasional crackle of the fire, the soft rustling of rough woolen clothes, and the distant murmur of voices from other parts of the home or village. You notice the texture of your clothing, thick, coarse wool or rough linen, heavy and stiff against your skin, often itchy and uncomfortable, but necessary for warmth and protection. If you're wearing leather shoes or simple sandals, they're more than just footwear. They're uncomfortable, stiff, and kind of like hugging a hedgehog every time you walk. Your body reacts with a mixture of itchiness and cold, and you shiver slightly, wishing for a softer fabric or a warmer day. Your first meal of the morning is humble, perhaps a crust of hard bread that's seen better days, a slice of aged cheese that crumbles in your mouth, or a bowl of thin, watery broth with a few scraps of leftover meat or vegetables. The bread is dense and chewy, like biting into a piece of history, and the cheese is sharp and pungent, almost enough to make you forget about the flavor of modern-day coffee or avocado toast. Drinking water, sometimes from a well that's a good walk away, can be a chore, especially if it's tepid or carries a faint mustiness that makes your nose crinkle. But you swallow it anyway, knowing that hydration is a luxury you can't ignore, even if it's not as refreshing as a cold glass of sparkling water. In this humble space, rituals of hygiene are simple, sometimes strange by modern standards. Many believed that a thorough bath could weaken the body or bring illness, so frequent washing was avoided, and cleanliness was more about appearances than actual health. Instead, you might burn herbs or incense, lavender, sage, or rosemary, to purify the air and mask the smell of sweat and dirt. People carried amulets or charms, often made of metal or bones, believing they warded off disease or evil spirits. Some would sprinkle vinegar or herbs over their clothes or skin, thinking it kept the miasma, those invisible, harmful airs, at bay. The idea of soap as we know it today was rare. Instead, rough cloths and herbal infusions did the job, or the task was simply postponed until a more proper time, which might never come. Your daily hygiene routine is a far cry from your modern shower or skincare routine. No fragrant gels, no fluffy towels, no warm water jets. Instead, it's a splash of cold water, a quick rub, and a prayer that your efforts are enough to keep the bad spirits and bad smells away. Taking a bath was suspicious, almost like announcing to your neighbors that you were planning something shady, so most just rinsed quickly, hoping no one would notice. Sometimes you'd use a handful of herbs or a splash of vinegar to try and freshen up, but the results are often more amusing than effective. Your hair still smells faintly of smoke and sweat, and your clothes cling stubbornly to your skin. Now, stepping back from the microcosm of your home, you notice the larger world outside your door. The village or town is a patchwork of simple, sturdy buildings, their walls darkened by smoke and age, with thatched roofs that sag under the weight of rain. The streets are narrow and muddy, splattered with dirt and animal droppings, and lined with market stalls overflowing with fruits, vegetables, and the odd oddity, dried herbs, skulls of small animals, or jars of mysterious liquids. The air hums with activity, merchants shouting, children squealing as they chase each other, blacksmiths hammering away at glowing iron, and farmers leading their oxen to or from the fields. The sounds are lively, chaotic, and sometimes jarring, more like a loud, bustling fair than a peaceful village. Despite the grime and mess, there's a rhythm to it all, a daily dance of survival that has persisted for centuries, and you, with your rough clothes and your simple routines, are part of this ancient rhythm. Your body reacts to the environment, your skin prickles from the cold, your muscles tense from the effort of daily chores, and your nose is constantly assaulted by a medley of smells, meat drying in the sun, manure, burnt wood, and the faint, almost mystical scent of herbs used to ward off illness. You're dressed in a heavy tunic, perhaps woven from coarse wool or rough linen, designed to withstand the weather, but feeling like a constant reminder of the hardships you face. Your feet are encased in stiff leather shoes or simple sandals that turn your steps into a cautious shuffle, as if you're always trying not to make too much noise in this fragile world. The discomfort is almost humorous. Your modern idea of a scratchy sweater is nothing compared to wool that feels like hugging a prickly hedgehog. Despite all this, you carry on. Your life is grounded in routines that have persisted for centuries, waking with the crowing of roosters, tending to the animals, chopping wood, brewing herbs, and preparing for whatever the day may bring. Your world is gritty, imperfect, and often uncomfortable, but it's familiar in its own way. It's a life that's rooted in necessity and resilience, woven into the very fabric of the land and the people who inhabit it. The smells, textures, and routines are part of a slow, steady rhythm that has carried generations forward, even through plague and war, famine and fire. And as you take it all in, the scent of smoke, the roughness of your clothes, the sound of distant hammering, you get a faint sense of acceptance. This is your world, with all its imperfections and oddities. It's not perfect, but it's yours. And now, with your mind a little clearer and your body a little more prepared, you're ready to step outside and face what comes next. Because despite the hardships, life here marches on, steadily, stubbornly, and with a resilience that's as old as the stones beneath your feet. The air outside greets you with a chill, a crisp, dry wind that bites at your cheeks and makes your nose tingle. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, a patchwork of muddy patches, loose stones and dusty dirt, each step stirring up a faint cloud of dust that settles on your skin and clothes. The sky is overcast or perhaps just shrouded in a low-hanging fog, lending everything a muted, almost ghostly hue. As you adjust your cloak or don the mask with the curved beak, filled with herbs and spices, you carry with you tools, a leather bag with dried herbs, a small pouch of charms, and perhaps a wooden staff or a set of wooden utensils. The world awakens around you, villagers bustling along the narrow streets, children darting past, their laughter echoing over the clatter of carts and the calls of merchants. The market square is alive, more lively than a modern supermarket on a Saturday, but with fewer bright lights and more animal noises, clucking chickens, braying goats, and the distant bark of dogs. You notice how everyone moves with purpose, some in a rush, others meandering, their clothes swaying and rubbing against each other, creating a tapestry of coarse fabrics and rough textures. You walk with a certain weight, your sturdy boots crunching over gravel and mud, your shoulders weighted down by the responsibilities you bear. Each step reminds you that your role here is vital, even if it's often thankless. Today, your task is clear. You are to serve as the community's healer, protector, or perhaps enforcer, an individual whose presence commands respect, or sometimes wary suspicion. Children stare at you, half curious, half terrified, as if they sense that beneath your simple robes or heavy coat lies a power they can't quite understand. Adults glance at you with a mix of reverence and caution, some nodding politely, others casting wary eyes, unsure whether you're a blessing or a curse. Your face, hidden behind the mask or exposed beneath a hood, is a symbol of both authority and mystery. You carry your tools, small bottles of herbal tinctures, a bundle of dried plants, or a bundle of sticks for fumigation, and your hands feel the roughness of them, cold and slightly sticky from the day's work. You move through different spaces, perhaps the village square, the marketplace, or the outskirts where the sick and injured gather. Each location has its own rhythm, the chatter of merchants bargaining over silks and spices, the murmur of prayers in the church or chapel, the hurried footsteps of soldiers preparing for patrol, and the quiet whisper of monks tending to the sick in their cloisters. You mingle with all these groups, your presence always noticeable. You might be called to examine a feverish child, feeling the warmth of their forehead, the dampness of their skin, and the faint tremor in their limbs. Or you might be asked to consult with a farmer about a sick cow, listening to the gurgle of its stomach and smelling the faint, foul odor of decay from its wounds. Your work is as much about observation and reassurance as it is about treatment. You might burn herbs or incenses, smoke curling up like tiny spirits ascending, to purify the air or chase away evil spirits. Some believe that carrying a cane wasn't just for support, it was for poking patients from a safe distance. Others thought that smoking tobacco inside the beak mask would keep the disease away, like medieval aromatherapy. You might sprinkle vinegar or herbal poultices on wounds, feeling the sting as the acids and herbs work their magic. You're constantly aware of the reactions you provoke. Some patients look at you with hope, clutching at your robes or begging for relief. Others turn away, wary of your strange methods or the fear that you might bring more harm than good. The social fabric around you is woven with complex threads. Nobles and landowners regard you as a necessary, if somewhat mysterious, part of life. Common folk see you as a healer or a ward against evil. Soldiers and guards often regard your presence with a mixture of admiration and suspicion. After all, your knowledge makes you potentially dangerous in their eyes. There are moments of quiet conversation, quick exchanges of words in low voices, gestures of reassurance, or a stern nod to signify that you're doing your job. Children tug at their parents' sleeves, whispering stories they've heard about the healer in the mask, while elders cross themselves or murmur prayers, hoping your presence will ward off the sickness that's always lurking nearby. The entire community moves around you, each person caught in their own daily rhythm, but all under the shadow of larger fears: war, famine, disease, and death. Some believe that certain plants and charms can ward off the plague: cloves, garlic, and onions carried in pockets, or tiny amulets made from bones or stones. Others swear that reciting prayers or performing rituals can keep evil spirits at bay, even if the illness itself is beyond their understanding. The community's rhythm is punctuated by market days, religious festivals, and military drills, each a reminder that life here is a fragile balance between order and chaos. And through it all, you remain a steady presence, an essential part of this ancient world woven into its fabric of hope, fear, and resilience. Behind every busy market stall and every wary glance, there's a deeper fear that shapes this world: fear of the invisible, the unknowable, the deadly. And as you continue your work, you realize that beneath your simple role lies a complex web of superstitions, beliefs, and traditions that define how this society copes with its most profound fears. To understand why people look at you that way, we need to step into their beliefs and superstitions, but for now, you keep moving forward, an unseen guardian in a world teetering on the edge of chaos and order. You feel it in the way the people around you move, furtively crossing themselves, whispering prayers under their breath, as if words alone could ward off the invisible enemies lurking everywhere. It's a subtle vibration in the air, like the faint hum of 1,000 anxious hearts beating in unison. Fear here isn't just a feeling, it's a constant presence, woven into every corner of daily life. You notice it in the crowded churches, where the heavy scent of incense mingles with the dampness of stone walls, and the faint glow of candles flickers like tiny stars struggling against the darkness. The bells toll often, but especially during funerals, their mournful chimes echoing through the streets, a reminder that death is never far away. The silence that follows feels heavy, almost oppressive, as if the very stones themselves hold their breath, waiting for the next catastrophe to strike. In this world, religiosity isn't just a matter of faith, it's a lifeline, a protective shield against the chaos. You see the signs everywhere, the quick crossing of oneself before entering a building, the murmured prayers before starting a task, the images of saints and holy figures that adorn every home and alleyway. People clutch rosaries like lifebuoys, their fingers tracing the beads, as if the act alone might stave off the sickness or misfortune. You might catch a glimpse of a procession winding through the streets, monks singing hymns in unison, their voices rising and falling like a wave of hope or desperation. The churches are packed, filled with flickering candles and the thick aroma of burning incense, which in this world is almost a perfume of protection. Today you might scroll through a modern app for comfort, perhaps a quick video or a funny meme. Yet here, comfort comes from clutching a relic, lighting a candle, or reciting a prayer. It's the medieval version of essential oils and aromatherapy, except with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning. Some believe that carrying a dead toad in your pocket could ward off the plague, a bizarre talisman against the invisible miasma, an idea as strange as it sounds. Others think that whipping themselves in the streets with blood running down their backs might earn divine mercy, a ritual as visceral as it is hopeful. You might even see a crowd gathered around a healer who is busy sprinkling herbs or pouring holy water, all in a desperate attempt to cleanse the air of evil spirits or corrupt humors. You're acutely aware of the collective fears that grip this community, how they unite and divide them at the same time. The fear of the plague is a shadow that darkens every conversation, every marketplace, every whispered rumor. It's a fear so pervasive that it influences even the smallest gestures, a suspicious glance at someone coughing, a hurried retreat from a stranger, or a door slammed shut when a neighbor falls ill. The fear of famine, of divine punishment, or of heretics and witches fuels accusations and paranoia. When someone coughs or shows signs of illness, you might see a crowd gather, murmuring accusations, pointing fingers, or even lynching individuals they believe are cursed or possessed. Communities are constantly on alert, scanning each face for signs of weakness or evil. You, as a plague doctor or healer, are caught in this web of fear. Every look, every whisper about you carries weight, either trust or suspicion. People might see you as a savior, clutching your herbs and charms in hope of salvation, or as a harbinger of death, the one responsible for your patient's suffering. When you pass through the town square, the whispers follow, sometimes prayers, sometimes curses. Some believe that your mask, with its beak filled with herbs, is a symbol of protection. Others fear it as a sign of death's close proximity. You might catch a glance that lingers too long, an unspoken question. Are you here to help or to hasten the end? There are strange, almost surreal practices rooted in this collective fear. Some believed that carrying a dead toad in your pocket could ward off the plague, an odd, amphibian-shaped talisman against the unseen. Others thought that whipping themselves in the streets, their blood mingling with the dirt, would earn divine mercy, a ritual as intense as it is futile. There are those who swear by the power of certain herbs, garlic, sage, or even bizarre mixtures of blood and saliva, applied or worn as charms. The air is thick with these superstitions, each belief a desperate attempt to control the chaos. It's the medieval version of essential oils, but with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning. Fear here is like the smoke from 100 chimneys, rising, swirling, filling every breath whether you want it or not. It's a fog that obscures reason and amplifies paranoia. You see it in the eyes of the townsfolk, wide, shimmering with worry, darting nervously from one corner of the street to another. It's in the hushed conversations behind closed doors, in the frantic prayers whispered during the night, and in the frantic gestures of those who believe that a certain relic or ritual might save them. Fear is the thread that unites and divides, binding communities in shared dread, yet tearing them apart with accusations and suspicion. Even you, standing at the center of this storm, feel its weight. You are both a part of it and apart from it. People look at you, sometimes with hope, sometimes with suspicion, as if your mask or your herbs could somehow control the chaos. They whisper prayers when you approach, or clutch their charms tightly, as if your presence itself is a test of their faith. Your role is ambiguous, at once a healer, a divine agent, and a potential harbinger of death. Every glance, every murmur, every prayer is a reminder of the fragile boundary between salvation and damnation in this world. And amidst all this, you learn strange, almost humorous truths about their desperation. Some believed that carrying a dead toad in your pocket could ward off the plague. Others thought whipping themselves in the streets, blood streaming down their backs, was a way to earn divine mercy, an act as brutal as it was hopeful. And some swore by bizarre concoctions, herbs mixed with animal blood, or strange powders made from crushed bones, applied with the hope that they would block the invisible miasma that clouds the air. It's the medieval version of essential oils, except with a slightly higher chance of accidental poisoning and perhaps a more colorful collection of ingredients. In this atmosphere of trembling faith and collective dread, the community exists in a state of constant vigilance. Every cough, every sneer, every whispered prayer is a reminder that life is fragile, held together by threads of superstition, fear, and desperate hope. Fear here is pervasive and persistent, like a faint but unshakable scent of smoke that lingers long after the flames have gone out. It's a powerful force, sometimes unifying, sometimes dividing, shaping how people see the world and their place within it. And even as you move through this landscape of shadows and whispers, you sense that beyond the fears and superstitions, there are bonds, fragile but real, that keep people holding on. Because, in the end, even in a world heavy with fear, the human need for connection, for reassurance, and for meaning remains unbroken. People may clutch their amulets and whisper their prayers, but they also reach out, sometimes in silence, sometimes with a gentle touch, because beneath all the dread, they still believe in something greater, something that might just save them. And beyond the prayers and charms, there are bonds that keep life moving, fragile, human, and surprisingly familiar. Because in this world of shadows, the strongest medicine of all might just be the simple truth that even in the face of terror, hope still whispers softly, waiting to be heard. It's as if, in this world of constant danger, the simplest act of a hand on a shoulder or a shared glance becomes a fragile anchor in the storm. You see it everywhere. Families huddled together in their cramped homes, where children's laughter still echoes amid the flickering candlelight. Forget your Netflix family dramas. Here, your cousin might literally sleep on the cold stone floor, just 2 feet from you, every single night, sharing space and silence in a way that words never quite capture. The bonds are raw, unpolished, and sometimes a little suffocating, but they're what keep the heart beating through the worst of times. And then there are the friendships, those tiny sparks that manage to survive in the midst of suspicion and hardship. You might witness a neighbor passing a crust of bread over a low wall, whispering advice about herbal cures or warning about the next suspicious cough. Perhaps a shared bottle of weak ale in a smoky tavern where a quick joke or a comforting nod reminds everyone that they're not alone in this chaos. Yet even these fragile ties are tinged with mistrust, After all, in a world where accusations of witchcraft can turn neighbor against neighbor overnight, trust is a rare and precious commodity. You might hear hushed rumors or see a friend suddenly cast a wary eye, wondering if the person next to them is secretly a spy for the local inquisitor, or worse, a carrier of the disease. Romance, too, finds its way into this tangled web of human connection, sometimes as hopeful as a promise whispered in a dark corner, and sometimes as impossible as a star glimpsed through a crack in the roof. Lovers steal fleeting moments beneath the shadows of night, exchanging promises in whispers, their eyes searching for reassurance amid the flickering candle flames. A quick glance across a smoky tavern might be enough, an accidental brush of hands, a stolen smile, the faint promise of a dance if the fiddler's instrument doesn't break or the crowd doesn't grow suspicious. Your modern swipe on a screen? Here, it's a glance over a crowded square, where hope flickers like the flame of a candle, fragile and easily snuffed out. And yet, amidst all this intimacy, social hierarchies carve their lines deep into the fabric of daily life. The noble's estate looms nearby, grand and distant, yet even they are not immune to the contagion of fear. Servants bow low before their masters, knowing that status can be both a shield and a target. A noble might pass you by with a dismissive nod, or perhaps a whisper that you're just a healer, respectful but distant. Clerigos, priests and monks, stand at the crossroads of faith and power. They might bless a crowd, their voices rising in chants that fill the air with incense-scented hope, or they might whisper warnings of divine wrath. You, as a plague doctor or healer, are somewhere in between, respected by some, feared by others, never fully trusted. You're the symbol of salvation, or perhaps the harbinger of death, depending on which side of the altar you stand. Community rituals are the threads that hold everyone together, even when suspicion threatens to tear them apart. You find yourself caught in the swirl of processions, people dressed in bright, embroidered cloaks, carrying relics or banners, their footsteps echoing on cobblestones as they march through the town. The scent of baked bread and roasted meats drifts through the air during festivals, mingling with the sharp tang of herbs and the smoky aroma of fires. Music fills the streets, flutes, drums and fiddles, creating a chaotic, lively soundtrack that masks underlying tensions. You can feel the rough grip of cold hands in yours during these moments, the warmth of shared food and laughter, even if fleeting. But social life isn't without its conflicts. Rivalries flare over land, inheritance, or petty jealousies. Accusations of witchcraft and heresy swirl in whispered conversations, often fueled by fear and greed. You might overhear a heated debate in a tavern, one neighbor accusing another of cursing their crops, or a noble whispering about a rival's treachery. Fights break out over disputed boundaries or old grudges, and sometimes these disputes spill into violence, turning community gatherings into scenes not far removed from chaos. You realize that beneath the veneer of camaraderie, society is a fragile dance, one misstep away from chaos. Your role in all this? It's complicated. You are both a stabilizing force and a potential source of suspicion. When people see you approach, they might clutch their loved ones tighter or step back warily. Some whisper prayers or cross themselves, hoping your presence will bring relief or at least delay the inevitable. Others eye you with suspicion, wondering if your herbs and masks conceal some dark secret. You catch the furtive looks, the whispered questions. Are you here to help, or are you part of the problem? Sometimes you're seen as a miracle worker, other times as a dark omen. Your work is woven into the fabric of their fears and hopes. an invisible thread connecting life, death, and everything in between. And there are the odd, almost humorous beliefs that somehow survive amid the terror. In some villages, people believed that sneezing during a wedding was a good sign, unless it wasn't, depending on way. A trencher of coarse bread, its crust crackling softly as you lift it, a bowl of thin, steaming pottage with the faint aroma of herbs and legumes rising up like a whisper. The air carries a medley of scents, earthy, faintly sour from vinegar, with hints of garlic and roasted onions that have caramelized overnight. A cup of weak ale sits nearby, its pale foam long gone, leaving behind a taste that's more bitter than sweet, a reminder of simpler, frugal days. You notice the textures, rough bread that scratches your gums, a spoon of thick, slightly gritty porridge slipping over your tongue, and a cool, damp cloth you've used earlier to wash your hands, now resting nearby as a quiet nod to ritual. The surfaces around you, worn wooden tables, a chipped clay plate, a battered knife, are all witnesses to countless meals shared or quietly consumed in solitude. Today's menu is humble but nourishing, crafted from what the market or the village's storerooms could offer. Dried beans, a handful of herbs, perhaps a lone salted fish preserved in brine. These ingredients, humble as they are, form the backbone of everyday life, especially for those who work the land or serve in the town. You might have glimpsed the bustling market yesterday, bargaining voices rising and falling like a tide, the scent of malted bread from the baker's oven, the sharp tang of fresh herbs, sliced and laid out like tiny jewels on a merchant's stall. The baker, with flour dusting his beard, stacked loaves that looked like small monuments of bread, while the butcher's carts spilled with cuts of salted pork and dried sausages, their surfaces glistening under the midday sun. You might have crossed paths with a merchant bartering for oranges or a healer clutching a vial of vinaigrette, the scent of citrus bright against the earthy backdrop of the marketplace. In this place, the act of eating is layered with ritual and social signals. You perhaps begin with a quick prayer, an inaudible whisper of gratitude or a plea for health, before reaching for your bread. Washing your hands is a simple yet sacred act, performed with water drawn from a basin, the coolness of it seeping into your skin as your fingers dance over the rough surface of the clay. The table is a stage for the social hierarchy. The local lord steward might have a finer knife, a more delicate piece of cheese, while the peasant's plate is a rougher affair, with bread meant to be torn and shared at will. The food reflects these divisions, rich, spiced meats and sweet fruits reserved for the elite, while the common folk feast on hearty stews, coarse bread, and pickled vegetables. Today's menu, with its pottage and bread, reminds you of the austerity that defines daily life, yet, even in scarcity, there's a certain poetry. The bread, dense and chewy, is like a slice of the earth itself, sturdy enough to sustain a day's labor. The pottage, simmered slowly over a fire, tastes of boiled grains, herbs, and whatever vegetables could be salvaged from the garden, perhaps a few wilted greens or a stray onion, all simmered into a thick, comforting broth. The taste lingers on your tongue, bittersweet, salty, and slightly metallic from the salted meat or fish. You might take a sip of water only to be met with the gritty, mineral-rich taste of groundwater filtered through stones and clay, a reminder of how even the simplest drink can carry the essence of the land. The ritual of eating isn't just about nourishment, it's woven into the fabric of social life. Perhaps you've observed the way meals are shared, no forks or spoons, just hands and rough wooden knives. The bread is torn into pieces, passed around like a communal gift, each piece a token of shared life. During a feast or a special gathering, you might see guests gathered around a central table, passing dishes and exchanging stories, voices rising in laughter and debate. But even at these moments, the shadows of hierarchy and scarcity linger. Servants might serve the nobility first, their movements precise and respectful, while the lower classes wait patiently for their turn. Religious days, like Lent or fasting periods, bring their own rules. Fish replaces meat, and bread is often the only sustenance, eaten in silence or with whispered prayers. Abstinence and ritual are part of the rhythm, reminding everyone that the body's desires are secondary to spiritual discipline. In these times, the act of eating is more than just survival. It's a statement of faith, of status, of belonging. You might watch a noble lady delicately nibbling at a morsel of dried fruit, her fingers gloved and precise, while a peasant lad devours a crust of bread, crumbs falling onto his lap, eyes bright with hunger. Humor seeps into the scene. Your modern food delivery app? Here, the promise of a hot meal arrives only with the sun, and it's often late or cold. Or perhaps that gluten-free loaf? It's a luxury that costs a month's wages if you can find it. As you sit and eat, the world outside your humble chamber continues, markets bustling, fires crackling, and the distant clatter of dishes from taverns. The smell of roasted meats, the crackle of bread crusts, the sharp aroma of pickled vegetables. These are the ingredients of life, binding people together through shared routines and simple pleasures. When the meal ends and you wipe your hands on a rough cloth, you feel a quiet reassurance. Here, amid the scarcity and the social divides, nourishment is still a form of celebration, a small act of defiance against the darkness that threatens to swallow everything. And of course, after the last crumb is eaten, the city's pulse continues, people turning toward music, laughter, and small acts of bravery, dancing in the taverns, singing in the streets, finding moments of joy even when shadows loom large. Because in this world, the table isn't just for eating. It's where life, in all its imperfect, unrefined glory, continues to unfold. One meal, one story, and one small hope at a time. You step out from the shadowed tavern into the cool dusk where lanterns sway gently on strings stretched across the narrow street. The air is thick with the scent of warm ale that has gone lukewarm, mingled with the dampness of recently mopped floors and the faint aroma of smoked sausages lingering from the last patrons. Shadows stretch long and thin like the fingers of a tired hand reaching for the night sky, while the muffled sounds of laughter and shouted bets drift out from the open doorways. As you walk, you notice the dim glow of a nearby lantern flickering against a weathered wall, casting a soft, amber light that flickers with the rhythm of stories told and retold. The street hums with life, whispers of gossip, the clatter of wooden carts, and the occasional burst of a bawdy song that tries to pierce the quiet, more out of hope than skill. Ahead, the tavern beckons, its rough wooden door slightly ajar. Inside, the air is warm and thick with dust, and the faint glow of a fire crackling in a stone hearth paints dancing shadows across the uneven walls. The long benches are crowded with villagers, their faces flushed from drink and laughter, hands clutching tankards that sparkle with frothy beer. You hear the dice rattling inside a leather pouch, an uncertain promise of luck, as someone rolls them across a scarred table, the outcome as unpredictable as the tides. The game of choice. 9 men's Morris, the wooden pieces sliding with deliberate patience, each move a small act of hope or despair. The players' voices rise and fall, some grumbling, others cheering, while the cups ring with a cheerful clink, and a tune, perhaps a lullaby or a bawdy tune, hums along with the clatter of the dice. That roll, the one that falls as clumsily as a late bill, reminds you that luck, like life, is often a matter of chance, and sometimes it's just a matter of whether the gods are smiling or indifferent. In the corner, a musician strums a lute, its strings singing out a melody that twists and turns like a serpent in the grass. A Rebecca joins in, its mournful cry weaving through the lively tune, while a pair of dancers, clad in simple clothes, their boots stamping out a rhythm, join hands in a circle. Their steps are straightforward, but each movement feels like a small rebellion against the darkness outside. Sweat beads on their foreheads, and their laughter, bright, honest, unpolished, rises over the hum of voices. You might find yourself swaying, your own feet moving instinctively, caught up in the pulse of the music that seems to beat in time with your own heartbeat. The dance isn't elegant, but it's sincere. Each step a tiny act of defiance, a reminder that life persists through rhythm and motion, even when shadows creep. Beyond the merriment, a small stage has been set up for the local religious festival, a simple platform draped with colourful cloth, though the colours are faded, almost as if they've seen too many seasons. An actor, dressed in a coarse tunic and a mask painted with exaggerated features, begins a moral tale, a saint's miracle or a moral lesson performed with exaggerated gestures and a voice that booms and then falters. The crowd watches silently at first, then erupts in laughter or applause, their faces lit by the flickering torchlight. The play is a mirror of their world, full of saints and sinners, hope and despair, all woven into stories that remind them of their place in the cycle of seasons and sins. Nearby, a procession winds through the streets, men and women carrying candles, their flickering flames casting eerie shadows that dance with each step. The smell of wax mingles with the scent of herbs and dried flowers, charged with the quiet reverence of a community holding on tight to its traditions amid uncertainties. But not all festivities are gentle or innocent. You are aware of the darker corners of this night, those who seek to impose their fears in the name of salvation. Flagellants, cloaked in rough robes, march silently in the shadows, their whips cracking softly against their backs in a ritual of penance. Their faces are solemn, eyes fixed on some distant point, as if trying to outrun the sins they believe are chasing them. The town's superstitions whisper through the air. When the bells toll, when the moon is right, when certain gestures are made, the spirits of misfortune might be stirred, or worse, curses could be laid. Curious onlookers gather at the edges of these rites, their whispers hushed, but their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. Some watch the public executions or acts of example with a mixture of morbid fascination and relief that they are not the one on display. The solemnity of these acts hangs heavy like a fog settling over the square, reminding everyone that even in moments of joy, shadows lurk just beyond the edge of sight. As a healer or doctor, if your role is known, you carry a quiet weight here. Even amid the laughter and song, your presence commands respect and a subtle caution. Someone might approach you seeking a quick word of advice. What herbs best dispel the evil eye, or which remedies can soothe a restless spirit? You touch the edge of a windowsill or the corner of a lantern, whispering a quick blessing or a protective charm, as if to ward off the unseen threats that lurk in the night. The eyes of some villagers linger on you, not just with gratitude, but with a quiet, wary reverence. Your knowledge a shield against the chaos, your presence a reminder that even amid merriment, life's fragility is never far away. Throughout the night, the emotions ripple like a small stream, laughter bubbling over the quiet fears, music rising like a prayer, and the occasional hush when a superstitious tale is told. The dancing and singing challenge the darkness outside, a fragile act of resilience that makes the shadows tremble just a little. The distant chime of the town's church bells echoes like a slow heartbeat, reminding everyone that the night's festivities are fleeting, that dawn's inevitable return awaits. Yet, in the midst of it all, the city breathes, alive with hope, superstition, and the unyielding human urge to find meaning in celebration, even when the world feels unsafe. And when the last song fades, you notice the quiet settling again, people slowly dispersing, their faces glowing with the warmth of shared moments. The flicker of candles dims, and the night whispers its secrets once more. The town, with all its fears and joys, knows well that life continues, birth and death intertwined, like the dance steps that echo in the shadows. For now, you too are part of this cycle, caught between the fleeting brightness of the festivities and the persistent darkness that waits in the corners. Because, after all, between a song and a silence, everything begins and ends again. Outside, the faint murmur of the village breathes life into the darkness, a lullaby of whispers, footsteps, and the gentle rustling of leaves. It's in this calm that you imagine the first breath of a newborn. Warm water, a soft cloth, a whisper of prayer. Each tiny life beginning with a fragile cry that echoes like a miniature bell, announcing the miracle of existence. The tiny hands, tiny feet, and the quiet hope cradled in a mother's arms remind you that every beginning is a delicate promise, woven into the fabric of time. As the days pass, the village's stories unfold, hearts joining in union beneath the arch of a humble church. The exchange of rings, the touch of bread and salt, the blessing murmured by the priest, these simple acts bind souls, turning vows into shared histories. The community gathers as witnesses, voices rising softly in song or quiet prayer, echoing the ancient rhythm of life, birth, union, and the quiet promise of continuity. In the warmth of the hearth or under the shade of an ancient tree, the elders pass down their wisdom, advice carved into worn wood, objects imbued with stories. Perhaps a carved bench, carved by years of hands, bears the scratches of countless conversations, advice on crops, tales of past hardships, lessons of patience. These quiet objects serve as bridges linking generations with whispered histories and simple tokens. An heirloom ring, a tool worn smooth by use, a piece of cloth stitched with love. Then comes the inevitable shadow, illness, the ache in bones, the fever that climbs like a silent spectre. You, perhaps, a healer or a wise woman, attend the bedside with gentle words and unguents, knowing that some stories are meant to end quietly, with dignity and grace. When the pestilence arrives, the rituals are hurried, the prayers softer, the silence heavier. No longer the elaborate rites of health and hope, only quick anointments and whispered pleas, an effort to hold on to life as it quietly slips away. You offer what comfort you can, your hands steady, voice calm, even as the weight of helplessness presses down. The final breath is a faint sigh, a closing of eyes that once saw the world with wonder. Outside, the town's somber bell tolls, a slow, grave sound marking the passage, short processions, somber steps, the last farewell whispered into the cold air. Bodies are laid in shared graves or in quiet earth, sometimes in simple trench graves, never forgetting the names, always remembering the stories. Names are spoken softly at the table, in prayers, in remembrance, each voice a thread in the fabric of collective memory. The icons of humility, faded frescoes of dancing skeletons, skulls painted as reminders of mortality, linger in churches and cemeteries, silent witnesses to the cycle of life. The wise words from Ecclesiastes echo in your mind. There is a time to be born and a time to die, a reminder that all things are woven into the same delicate cloth. And so, in these quiet moments, You find comfort in the endless rhythm, birth, love, death, each a part of the same sacred dance. The simple act of breaking bread, the raising of a cup, the shared smile, these are the small miracles repeating themselves again and again. As you close your eyes, the candle's flame diminishes, shrinking into a tiny point of light that whispers of quiet endings and gentle beginnings. The city outside breathes on, its heartbeat steady, its stories unfolding in the shadows. And you too are part of this endless cycle, an eternal dance of light and dark, of arrival and departure, where every ending whispers softly to every new beginning. Now, rest. The night gently closes in, and in its darkness there is a promise. The dawn will come again, and with it, new stories, new hopes, and the quiet assurance that life's light, however faint, never truly goes out.